Hey guys, my name is Magnetico and welcome to a series where I take video game systems, clean them up, repair them if need be, and also I mod them as well. And today we're going to be taking out a system that's very dear to my heart and hopefully a lot of you guys out there, and that is the original PlayStation system. Now, this particular system I bought off eBay for about $20. The seller did describe that it didn't come with any components other than the controller, which I'll show you here in a minute because I'm really excited about it. And the other thing is he did tell me that the laser no longer works. So what we're going to do is we're going to open this system up. We're going to make sure there's no leakage. We're going to make sure all the capacitors are looking good, that there's no bulge or anything going on with them as well. And also just make sure we clean up any dust bunnies and make sure this is a pristine looking system. And then I'll go ahead and take a look at the laser as well. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and show you the controller. This is the classic, the first version of the PlayStation controller to come out. And I thought that was really cool because all the controllers that come out with this now are just DualShock, and it's nice just to have this one controller without any DualShock and play some of the games, especially the older games that didn't even require DualShock in the first place, so I can play it as it originally was, which I'm a big fan of. But before we get started with anything, let's go ahead and test this just to make sure the laser doesn't work. Well, let's turn on the power here, and I have Resident Evil Director's Cut ready to load whenever I close the lid, but I'm just checking the power and it looks like there is a boot screen and also hopefully a BIOS screen. Yep. All right. Looks like we're good here. Let's go ahead and close the lid just to make sure that it reads the game that I have in there. And nothing seems to be happening. You guys can't hear it, but there's a lot of whirling going around inside the disc tray. So that's a pretty clear indicator to me that the disc tray is unfortunately not working for this system. The seller was telling the truth, the disc tray is not working, and that leaves us with no other option than to open it up, clean it up, and hopefully we'll find something in there. Maybe something's dirty, maybe something disconnected or just eroded away. Hopefully we can go in there and fix it once we spot it. So without further ado, let's start with the cleanup. So the first thing you're going to need is obviously the game system itself. We're going to need some tools, and I'll go ahead and link this in the description below. All these items will be in the description below. Isopropyl alcohol, 99% is what I use. Toothbrush, and some cotton swabs or Q-tips. All right, so we're going to go ahead and grab the system, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip it over. As you can see, my model here is the 5501 version, and there's going to be 6 screws we have to take out. So there's going to be 1 in each corner and then 2 in the middle there. So after we take off these 6, we should be able to lift the lid on this system pretty easily. All right, so now with the last screw there, we're going to go ahead and flip the system over. And as I said earlier, just go ahead and lift upwards and it should come right out without much resistance whatsoever. So let's go ahead and put the lid to the side here. And we're going to take off 2 screws next to the controller ports here. And the best thing about this system, I think, is like they're just Phillips screws. Like they're all pretty much the same size. There's nothing fancy. You don't really have to keep track of all of them, which is great. So it's a pretty easy disassembly. So we're going to put these screws aside, and in order to disconnect the controller port, just lift the ribbon off from the motherboard and you should be able to just take it right out. So let's go ahead and put that aside as well. Next, we're going to go ahead and disconnect the power supply from the system itself. And there's going to be 2 screws located in the back here. Go ahead and take those out. And it's not super difficult to lift this out. It's a little tricky, but you just have to slide it away from the system. I find that out here as I'm trying to pull it out, but as soon as you slide it out, it comes right off. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a quick check, make sure all the capacitors are looking good. None of them are bulging. Looks good to me here. And we're going to turn it over, make sure there's no leakage of any sort. So with that done, let's go ahead and remove the culprit here, which is the laser. Let's go ahead and disconnect the ribbon and the power for the laser here. This one's a little bit rough. Be gentle with it, only because it's so thin. The wires are so thin. But yeah, there's the culprit here. And the laser looks a little bit dirty, but not too bad. So I'll have to take another look at this here while we're disassembling this. But for now, we'll just go ahead and take this and put it aside. So there's going to be 4 screws we're going to have to take out here. And there's going to be 3 in a corner and 1 more towards the center. So let's go ahead and take those out. Once we take these out, you should be able to pull off the metal encasing. Could be a little bit tricky, but just kind of wiggle it out and it should come right off. Go ahead and put that aside. And there's going to be 4 more screws there at the bottom. 1 by the video port, 1 by the IO port, and then 2 with the other IO port there. And I totally forgot to take this off earlier, but yeah, the little door just kind of falls off from the other IO port. So let's put that aside as well. And at this point, we should be able to lift the motherboard out. It is tiny. I cannot believe how small this is. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and inspect it, make sure there's nothing crazy going on. And let's go ahead and take out this metal encasing. Comes off pretty easy as well. And that should leave us with just the plastic at this point. Go ahead and grab the top shell here and go ahead and flip it over. And there's going to be these 2 clips you can kind of push towards each other, kind of like when you pinch them. When you do that, the button should come right off, but you can use a screwdriver to kind of finish the job there. And I went ahead and pulled out the power button there. It does have a spring, so make sure you hang on to that. The power goes with the spring. And then you're going to do the same with the smaller reset button. Pinch it in, finish the job, push it right out. So that's the reset button, like I said earlier. Go ahead and put that aside. Next is we're going to take off these 2 screws that have to deal with the open button. The piece that I'm holding onto here is metal, so just kind of hold it in place because it does have a spring attached to it. So I just kind of like to hold it in place while I deal with these screws real quick. But once you take off the screw, there should be like no pressure that's being applied, and you should be able just to take off that metal piece right there. There is a plastic piece attached to it. Don't mess with any of this, just leave it as it is. It's like a metal piece attached to a spring to a plastic piece. So put that aside, and we should be able to pinch these in as we have with the other ones. Use the screwdriver to pop it out, and this should be the open button. All right, we're gonna hit the left here and we're gonna get rid of one of the disc tray holders. Take off this screw here. There's nothing crazy going on with this. It's just a piece of plastic that's, you know, holding everything together. So put the screw aside here. Let's go ahead and just kind of take this out. As you can see, there's nothing crazy. Put that aside. This other side, however, this one's a little bit more tricky. Go ahead and undo the screw. And I like to hold a little bit of pressure on this one as well. So go ahead and just push it down until you take the screw completely off. Go ahead and take off the piece of plastic. It's kind of jammed in there. Got to be careful with it, but there is a spring, a large spring attached to this. So go ahead and get rid of that. And this is your piece of plastic, and make sure you remove the spring as well. Hang on to that, don't lose it. And now we should be able to take off the door. Best way to do it is to go ahead and flip the lid all the way up, like all the way over, and it should come right off. One of the things I recommend doing is grabbing all the plastic pieces we've taken apart so far, like the lid, the shell, all the buttons like the power button, reset button, open button. Go ahead and grabbing all the plastic pieces and putting those in like a little tub or maybe like a bucket or even the sink full of warm water with a little bit of soap inside of it, and let that soak for a while. I don't recommend doing anything with any metal pieces whatsoever, only because I worry about rust and I don't know how resistant these parts are to rust at all. So only plastic, let those soak for a while. And once we're done with that, we can go ahead and reassemble the system. But the only thing I recommend is that you let those sit out and dry completely. And I'm talking 100% before we even attempt a reassembly. So while your plastic parts are drying, we can go ahead and work on the motherboard next. I'm going to go ahead and lift this little tab here. And with a toothbrush and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, we're going to go ahead and start cleaning all these hard to reach areas. All the little tiny parts that might have a little bit of dust or some kind of dirt. toothbrush works really well. I'm going to go ahead and check the capacitors. These are the most important ones here, is this bunch right here. Make sure none of them are leaking. Mine look good. So nothing to worry about here, thankfully. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. Again, with some isopropyl alcohol, I'm going to use the toothbrush to get all the small areas here that are hard to reach. And once you're done with that, you'll hit it with a Q-tip and some isopropyl alcohol. Look how dirty this is. Yuck. But once we get done with that side, we can go ahead and flip it over. I don't know why this tab getting caught on this capacitor. I don't know if it's by design, but once you lift that up there, you can go ahead and get the other areas as well with the isopropyl alcohol and Q-tip. Next up is the power supply, and again with the toothbrush, a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, go ahead and clean the top there, or the bottom I should say, I'm sorry, clean the bottom. And I would go really light on this other area here, just enough to clean the parts that are most exposed. I wouldn't go under anything. And oh look, we have one of these bent capacitors here, so make sure that that's straightened out there. With a Q-tip, I'm going to go ahead and hit the back with some isopropyl alcohol. Look how yellow it's getting. You gotta watch out for those spikes too, because the cotton swab will get caught on there, and you know, it creates a mess. But lastly, out of the electronic parts, we're going to clean this controller port and memory card. And this metal shell here, or the metal bottom here, mine's incredibly dirty, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'm going to see if there's a different way that we can clean it, but I'll hit it with some isopropyl alcohol as well. And last but not least, the metal top there, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with some isopropyl alcohol as well. Hopefully you guys didn't wash this one, just to avoid any rust. See, I think I have some rust going on right there, so I don't recommend washing this. Just use some isopropyl alcohol. Go ahead and grab the top shell, and it should be completely dry. There is some kind of like hard to reach areas that the soap water didn't really clean that well, so I'm just going to use a Q-tip and some isopropyl alcohol to get into that. Also, if your shell isn't 100% dry, use the Q-tips as well to kind of get the rest of that residual water. But other than that, this shell is looking great. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the lid, and I'm going to go ahead and put this little knob into the plastic. Make sure it's all facing all the way up, and then close it like so. So at this point, nothing's holding the door together. Nothing is spring loaded. It's just kind of sitting there. So hang on to it as you're flipping it over. And we're going to grab this piece of plastic here. Again, nothing exciting going on with this one whatsoever. Go ahead and put it into the shell like so. And now the door should be held together. There's a bunch of like plastic dust on my screw here, so I'm cleaning that off. You don't have to do that. That's completely optional. But once you get the screw, go ahead and screw this piece of plastic, and now your door shouldn't be falling off every time you flip it over. This one's a little bit more tricky, the other side, the one with the cogwheel. Go ahead and grab the spring from earlier and put the piece of plastic into the spring like so, and the short leg should be catching onto that little plastic piece as shown there. So you can see the long leg from the spring. That's the one that has to go in first into the shell. There is a slot for it. You won't miss it, but it is a pain in the butt because you can't let the spring get loose. Otherwise you have to start this whole process over. So slowly apply pressure and kind of wiggle it into place. And you'll know it's in place whenever the piece of plastics go through the holes, but you're going to have to be applying pressure the whole time. So let me go ahead and move my arm here. And we're gonna, with our other hand, we're gonna apply pressure with our thumb, and then we're gonna go ahead and place the screw, again applying some pressure, and then screw this guy back in. This might take you a few tries, and that's completely okay. It is a little bit weird, but once you screw it in there, you now have a spring-loaded door for your PlayStation. So if I flip this over and I let it go, it's just gonna spring wide open. Nothing's going to hold it together yet. But before we do anything else, let's go ahead and put the buttons back in. I'll start with the reset button. Next, I'll put in the open button. And then lastly, the power button. Don't forget, the power button does have a spring with it, so make sure the power button is in the spring, and then you put it together like so. Perfect. Now we have a spring-loaded power button. Let's go ahead and flip this over so we can go ahead and find a way to latch onto that the disc tray. We're going to find this piece from earlier, the metal piece with the plastic piece and a spring. And luckily, the corners do have holes, so you know exactly how to sit it into the shell here. But it is a little finicky. If you move it around in any way, it tends to become loose. So put it back together, apply some pressure. Those are the two holes we're going to put some screws into. Apply some pressure and then put the screws as so. Again, before we continue on, make sure all the pieces up to this point are completely dry because we're about to put the cover back on. Oh, I lost my screwdriver head there. Completely dry. Make sure everything is good. This would be a good place to do the last check before we move on to putting on the cover and all the other pieces back together. All right, so with this screw, the top shell is now complete. We can go ahead and flip this over. As you can see, it's not opening anymore. We hit the open button and it opens. And we should be able to close it and it'll latch back in. Very nice. Good job, guys. All right, go ahead and grab the bottom shell. And make sure that the power supply section's on the left. And also grab this metal piece and put it into place like so. You know you did it right if all the plastic pieces poke through the metal piece like so. We're going to do the same with the motherboard. Just make sure those little plastic pieces go to their respective holes. You shouldn't have to apply too much pressure on this one. Next, we're going to grab our screws and we're going to screw 4 screws down like we took off earlier. And one of them is going to go towards the AV port. And another one on the IO port. And then the last 2 on the larger IO port here. Grab our metal plate, make sure you put it on top, and this one you will have to snap into place, so make sure you apply some pressure and make sure the pieces of plastics are poking through their respective holes. And once it's snapped back together, go ahead and grab the 4 screws that we took off earlier. So it's going to be 3 in the corners and then 1 towards the center. Oh, wrong one. Yep, towards the center. There we go. Perfect. Grab the power supply, and remember when we took this off, we slid it away from the system. So to put it back on, we'll slide it into the system, and it should fit pretty easily. We're going to go ahead and plug the power supply to the motherboard so the system is powered on. Remember earlier we took off 2 screws from the back end here, so we're going to apply those back in there. And everything should be nice and snug. Look at that. I like it. Let's go ahead and grab the controller port next. And you have the option, you can screw it back in there or you can apply the blue ribbon first. I tend to put the ribbon in first into the motherboard before I screw it back in, but it's up to you. I'll go ahead and put that in there like so. And then I'll just go ahead and place the controller port on the plastic and it should be nice and snug. Once it's in place, you can go ahead and place a screw on the left. Oh, I lost my screwdriver header. And then go ahead and place one on the right as well. All right, so the culprit here, the laser, go ahead and make sure the ribbon is in place. It should go across and there should be a plastic piece that kind of holds it into place like so. Also route the power under it. It should already be on its way there. The ribbon is the one that causes a little bit more trouble. But once you're holding on to both of them, go ahead and place the laser on top. So everything's routed. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and put the laser ribbon back together here. Nice and tight. And then we'll put the power back in as well. I did open up the laser. Everything seems to look good. There was enough grease on it. There wasn't anything that was like that was eroded or anything leaking, or there was nothing disconnected, which is odd. So the only thing I'll do for this laser is I'll go ahead and clean it with a Q-tip and isopropyl alcohol. Make sure it's nice and clean. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and place the top shell right on top, and it should just slide right back in there. It is super easy. It is super fun to do. Let's go ahead and finish this up here. We're going to apply the 6 screws that we took off earlier. Remember, 1 in each corner and then 2 in the middle as well. Those rubber pads are looking like they're looking a little rough. I'm gonna see if I can replace those sometime, but other than that, let's go ahead and flip this over. The last piece we have to put on here is gonna be the cover for the IO. Go ahead and close that back up. Look at this. Oh, it looks so good. It looks so clean. Let's do a final touch here. Wipe off any dust that might have been collected while I was working on it. Oh yeah, look at this guy. Alright, so final test here. Resident Evil Director's Cut in the system. I'm going to go ahead and power it on, and it looks like it is receiving power, so that's good. There is a boot screen, so let's see if it'll load the game. Yep, looks like it did. That's amazing. And it looks like it even loaded the game fully here. So we have a working system now just by cleaning the laser. So it looks like our little PlayStation system that we got for the cheap on eBay ended up working after all. It just needed a little bit of TLC, and we tore it apart. We cleaned everything off. And more importantly, we made the laser work simply by cleaning the laser with some isopropyl alcohol. Now, I won't lie to you, the laser seems to seek the disc more than I'm comfortable with, and also tends to make more of a whirling noise than I'm really comfortable with as well. So I'm thinking that the laser is gonna die eventually, but for now, this will be the system that I'll use to play a lot of my PS1 games, whether it's my Saga series or whatever else it is. It looks like this will be the one, but I know for a fact that laser is gonna go out. So until then, it looks like I can either look into replacing the laser with another one from another PlayStation, or we're gonna mod it, and that is for a different video altogether. But I'm just super excited. I'm super pumped that I can play games on this. So if this is your kind of thing where, you know, we tear down systems, fix them, mod them, whatever the case may be, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you're notified every time I post one of these videos. So until then, I think I'm gonna play some Resident Evil some more. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.